Okay, so this short little video is for two classes. One is Philosophy 202, Philosophy of Human Nature, and the other one is Philosophy 110, Philosophy through Film. We're using the same text in this case for both classes. So the Human Nature class will be thinking about how what I'm saying pertains to human nature. The Philosophy Through Film class will be thinking about how what I'm saying relates to the film The Wizard of Oz. Okay, so we've been talking about the Tao Te Ching of Lao Tzu. Tao is the key word of this philosophy. De, Te, pronounced de, it means power. Whenever anything is serving its proper function well, there is this mysterious power, and it's called De. So anything that's in attunement with Tao receives De. And Ching, it simply means book, great book, like our word Bible. So a good translation is the way and its power, because the word Tao is usually translated as way. And that's Arthur Waley's translation that we're using here, the way and its power. So I like to just take one chapter at a time and look at it and draw from it all the wisdom that I can find. And what's unique, I think I said this once before, what's unique about the Tao Te Ching is each chapter is self-contained. Each chapter is a microcosm of the macrocosm. So each one tells the whole story of Taoism. It's sort of like Plato's dialogues. They have that in common. They're the only two things, the only two writings that I know of that do that. So each chapter tells the whole story of Taoism. And then you read another chapter, and that's the whole story also, but from another perspective. And then you put those two together, and you got a more full understanding of the whole. So I thought I would take chapter 51, Li, in Roman numerals, and it's on page 205 of the Waley translation. And perhaps we can look at another chapter as well. But before I go into this chapter, I'd like to say one of the valuable things I found from philosophy is that it tells you what's important and what's not so important. One philosopher said that philosophers are legislators of value, because in our everyday way of being in the world, we sometimes lose what's important, and we start making things that are not so important become the center of our lives. And then the things that are really central, we put them on the periphery. So Lao Tzu is going to tell us what's important, and so that way we can become aware about what we should put our concern towards, especially these days during this pandemic. It sort of forces us, at least the thoughtful ones among us, to think about what's important. So what is important to Lao Tzu? Well, Tao. Tao is important. Why? Because it gives birth to everything. It's the source of everything. So in The Wizard of Oz, it means going home. And one of the great values of the film, The Wizard of Oz, and the storyline is Dorothy becomes aware of what's important. She becomes aware and very thankful at the end of the film. There's no place like home. That anyone that says that to themselves or been away from home for too long can feel the power of that. But Dorothy means it in a deeper way also, not just trying to get back home literally, but getting back to the source, dwelling near the source. So that's one of the great teachings of Taoism. So Lao Tzu writes in chapter 51, Tao gave them birth. So that's the first line. So everything that comes forth from concealment into unconcealment, is coming forth because Tao sends them on their way. So Tao is the great source of everything. It's the beginnings of everything. And along with Tao comes Da. So I told you, when any of the 10,000 creatures, the word them in the phrase Tao gave them birth refers to the 10,000 creatures. The 10,000 creatures is a metaphor for all the beings that are really in the process of becoming. In fact, for Taoism, there really is no being. Everything is becoming. Things are not already constituted, but things are in the making. As we know today, how things are changing day by day. Things reach their peak. They look for that curve that Dr. Fauci is telling us about. And then they begin to dissipate. So everything has an origin, a cycle, and an ending, and then it rises again. So Tao is the beginnings, the alpha. And whenever anything is in attunement with Tao, it receives Da. So Da is the power of Tao. So the next line is, the power of Tao reared them. So Tao gives them birth. How? Well, we looked at that chapter. Tao is giving birth to the one is separating into yin and yang. Out of the interplay of yin and yang, the three comes to be. And three is whatever comes to be out of the interplay of yin and yang. And then if you count up all the threes, then you have 10,000 things. But the 10,000 things is not a finite number. Well, it's finite, but it's not just 10,000. It's a metaphor for everything. So Tao gave them birth. Perhaps it should say gives them birth, because it's constantly giving birth. The power of Tao, that is Da, rears them. That rearing means it develops them. Shape them according to their kind. Why does Lao Tzu say according to their kind? Well, because trees give birth to trees. Fir trees give birth to fir trees. Rose bushes give birth to rose bushes. Humans give birth to humans. So everything is following a particular form of its species. So the Tao is shaping them all. He says, the power of Tao reared them and shaped them into whatever form they take according to their kind. It perfected them, giving to each its strength. So qi is strength. Qi means life energy in Chinese. So qi is the best medicine. If you can, in fact, these days it's perhaps more important than ever to develop and foster qi. Qi is the best medicine. So whenever anything has qi, it has life energy. And actually the word qi also means breath. And oddly enough, this virus attacks the breathing, respiration. So breath is life. Whatever has breath is living. Whatever is breathing is divine, according to Taoist philosophy. So when any of the 10,000 creatures, including us, is in tunement with the source, dwelling near the source, then it receives Da. And Da is that which gives it strength. If it has strength, then it can ward off any power, any negative influence. Perhaps even some people get the virus, for example, and they have very few symptoms, and then they develop antibodies, and then they have antibodies against at least that strain of the virus. So the best medicine is qi. And how do we develop qi? By dwelling nearness to the source through the balance of yin and yang. So that's what I get from that first sentence. Tao gave birth. I would change the word gave to gives, since it's constantly going on. Tao gives birth. Tao gives them birth. them refers to the 10,000 creatures. The power of Tao, the Da of Tao, reared them, it shapes them according to their kind, and perfects them, giving to each thing its strength. So whenever anything is striving, it's because it's receiving Da and breathing. And he goes on, therefore, of the 10,000 things, that is all the creatures, there is not one that does not worship Tao and do homage to its power. What could he mean by that? The 10,000 creatures are really worshiping Tao? Well, maybe not consciously. They're not getting on their knees and worshiping. The birds are not worshiping Tao. Literally, they're not going to church and worshiping Tao. But there's a tacit awareness that they're drawing from this source. And they know, maybe not consciously know, but instinctively and unconsciously know that there's a source that's giving them life. So everything, in a sense, is really worshiping Tao. So he goes on, of the 10,000 creatures, there's not one that does not worship Tao and do homage to its power. We all know when we start losing our power, our life energy, how devastating that is, and how wonderful it is to receive it back. And so we're doing homage to the power of Tao. We're worshiping Tao. We worship life and the source of life. And then he went, this next sentence, I think, was directed toward the Confucian school, which is, there's a lot of polemics going on, kind of between Lao Tzu and Confucius, because the main school of thought in China was not Taoism, it was Confucianism. And so he writes, no mandate ever went forth that accorded to Tao the right to be worshipped, nor to its power the right to receive homage. No one said, and what he's saying there is, there's no mandate, there's no law, there's no ritual, there's no legislation, there's no religion that mandates that we should worship Tao. There's no one that can give anyone the right to worship Tao. It's just already there. We worship life. That's why everyone is so devastated now, right? Because we worship life so much, and now life is being threatened on Earth. And so it threw the world in a tizzy. So everyone is worshiping, not just humans, all living beings are worshiping the source of their own life, whether they know it or not. That's what he's saying there. And there's no overt mandate that needs to go forth to say you should worship Tao and worship and not worship something else, because Tao is the source of life, and every creature worships the source of life. And he goes on, it was always and of itself so. It was this way from the beginning. It is that way now, and it will always be that way, that there's a source and it's to be worshipped. That's why I began talking at the beginning about one of the wonderful things of philosophy is that it tells us what matters. So what matters to Lao Tzu is dwelling near the source, is getting back home. And the idea is that we're already home. This is what Dorothy realizes at the end of the film. There's no place like home. Home means dwelling near the source. And he goes on, therefore, as Tao bore them, like they said at the beginning, gave them birth and gives everything its power, its chi, and reared them and made them grow and fosters them and harbors them and protects them, gives them strength to ward off the threat of non-being, brood for them. So you must rear them, but not lay claim to them, control them, but never lean upon them, be chief among them, but not manage them. This is called the mysterious power, Da. So there's this mysterious power. And it's the power of Tao. So whatever's in attunement with Tao, whatever strikes this identification with Tao, receives Da. And so all the qualities of Tao become the qualities of the Taoist sage. The Taoist sage is a human being who has is dwelling in nearness to the source. So this is how it's related to human nature. Human beings have within themselves the potentiality to dwell in nearness to the source and to receive this mysterious power. And we have it within our power also to act in accordance with Tao. So one of the insights I gained when I began studying Taoism was that all the qualities of Tao become qualities of the sage. So Tao is mysterious, for example. It's beyond comprehension. You can think it, but you can't form a representation of it. You can't know it as an object of knowledge. That's why it's beyond words. It's Wu Ming, that is nameless. So all the qualities of Tao become qualities of the sage. So how is Tao related to the 10,000 creatures? Well, it's rearing them, but it doesn't lay claim to them. It doesn't overtly try to shape them and give them legislation and laws. It controls everything, but it doesn't lean upon them. It doesn't micromanage. He says, therefore, as Tao bore them, and the power of Tao reared them, made them grow, fostered them, harbored them, brewed for them, so you act like Tao. All the qualities of Tao become qualities of the sage. So you must rear them, foster life. Wherever you see life, foster it. If you see something is too much, make it less. If you think something is not enough, make it more. Try to find that balance between yin and yang. The Taoist sage just goes through life, fostering life, like water. Water finds the lowest place, keeps on moving. If something is in its way, it just bends right around it. Today, when I was walking my dogs, we went to Canal Fulton at the towpath, and there's a nice river. It's not a big river, but it's a river. And we were walking, and I was watching the river. If you observe water, it can give you all kinds of indications about how to move through life. What does water do when something gets in its way? A big tree fell, in fact, in the river today when we were walking, and it made a nice sound, a babbling sound. I thought of that. I thought there's a beautiful line from the musical Oklahoma, and Ray Charles does a wonderful job with that with Count Basie's orchestra. And there's one line that says, "The sounds of the earth are like music." And so where this tree fell in the river and the water was rushing around the tree, it made a musical sound. And I took note of that. But one could watch the river moving and think about how to move through life. If something gets in a river's way, what does the water do? It just keeps moving and goes right around it. Doesn't stop and quarrel with it, engage in polemics. It just moves right around it. If there's a hole, it fills it up with its substance, becomes bigger than it keeps moving. What else about water? It follows the lowest place. It doesn't scramble to get on top. It goes down low, the lowest place. And what else? It fosters everything. Wherever there's water, there's life. In fact, that's the big thing about life. They're looking for life in different planets, and then they look for water because that's the source of life. So water can be a teacher of how to move through life, about what's important and what's not. So be like the Tao. Rear them, foster them, but don't lay claim to them. Don't overtly, artificially try to control things. Don't lean upon them. Be chief among them. Be the highest human being, superior human being, but dim your light. He dims his light, yet still shines, Lao Tzu says. Don't try to manage anything. Try to achieve this great identification with the source, and then you'll realize what's important, that you're already home, and there's no place like home.